Do you remember when you were 18 years old? Do you remember the feeling of being 18? Joy was everywhere, especially when there was something that you wanted, because you knew when you were 18 that you were bulletproof. You were fearless. If you're like me, maybe you think back to how you felt then, and you remember that it felt pretty good, right? Yeah, that was a good way to feel. Where does that feeling go? As we go through life, I'm going to paraphrase that old bumper sticker, stuff happens. And the stuff adds to that baggage that we drag around. And most of the stuff is fear. Most of what's in our baggage is fear. Fear of failure, fear of, like my grandma Weaver always said, looking like a fool. Or as we heard our fabulous referee Daryl say yesterday from the center of the boxing ring, fear of rejection. So how do we get rid of that fear? How do we get back to the joy of being 18 years old? Let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a performer. I didn't really know what that meant, but I just knew that's what I wanted to do. Now you can probably tell by looking at me that I am not a spring chicken. May 27th, I'll be 29 years old this year. Thank you so much for that applause. I love every person in this room except for the two people who laughed. That was not supposed to be a joke. You won't be surprised that I graduated high school in 1976, and I loved listening to the radio. As a matter of fact, one day, driving from my last class at Carver High School to my after-school job at Casual Corner. Any of you ladies remember Casual Corner? Yeah, great store. In my 1969 sunflower yellow Chevy Nova, with the aftermarket air conditioning, and the black vinyl Landau roof. I was styling in that car. It suddenly hit me that there was a guy talking in between the songs on the radio. I'd never noticed that before. Right there in Columbus, Georgia, he was being paid to be on the radio. I could do that. That was performing. I don't think my wheels touched the ground all the way to the shopping center. I went flying into the parking lot. I ran through the parking lot, into the mall, and into Casual Corner, through the store, into the employee lounge, grabbed up the phone and dialed. (1976, y'all). The radio station. What do I have to do to be on the radio? I want to do what you're doing for a living. You have to have a license from the Federal Communications Commission. Well, how do I get one of those? You go up to the field office in Atlanta and you take a test. A hard test. An electronics test. And if you pass, they'll give you a license. Successful radio career, here I come. I was 18, I knew I could do that. When the envelope with the study materials arrived, all that joy crumbled into fear. Howie Castle was not kidding. That was hard stuff. And for a moment, I didn't know how I was going to do it. And then I remembered that I had a secret weapon. My daddy could fix anything that plugged into the wall or ran on batteries. My whole life, I had watched him, with his big hands, hold onto tiny electrical components and connect them to even tinier pieces of wire using a soldering iron. To this day, I love the smell of hot solder in the morning. He helped me study. I aced the test. And I went back to the radio station to see Howie Castle. What could he do? He had to interview me, right? Because he thought he was just blowing off some irritating kid on the phone. But here I am sitting with a foolish grin on my face and an FCC license in my hand. And then he asked the stupidest question I've ever heard in any interview ever, and I've heard a few dumb ones. Do you have any tapes? Wasn't this a radio station? Don't radio stations have their own music? But I wanted to be helpful, so, well, yeah, I've got a whole box of 8 tracks out in my car. I've got 3 Dog Night, I've got BTO, I've got Steve Miller Band. Y'all know he laughed at me, right? That was not the kind of tape he was looking for. He wanted a tape of me doing a radio show, which of course I didn't have because I'd never done one. So he set me up in the production studio, showed me how to use the equipment, control board, lots of big knobs, on and off switches, those funny little meters that tell you you're doing something, hopefully doing it right. Turntables over here, 2 big reel-to-reel machines over here, those really big ones with the big metal reels. They're 10-inch reels with 1/4-inch tape. They could probably record 2 hours of stuff on them. And after he'd given me the cursory introduction to the equipment, he gave me a stack of 45s and a stack of public service announcement cards and told me to make him a radio show. And he went back to his office. Y'all, I'm remembering that event. I'm scared right now. My heart just started pounding. I was excited when I went in for the interview. Yeah, a little nervous for the interview, but because I was 18, I knew I had it. I knew I had it. He was going to hire me as a DJ that day. But here I was sitting in the production studio, having no idea what to do. If you've seen me in this room yesterday, a little bit the evening before, you know what I was listening to the radio for, because every time the music comes on here, I'm bopping, I'm dancing. When I listened to the radio, I was paying attention to the music. I was not listening to the guy on the radio, not paying the first bit of attention, so I didn't know what to do. So I just turned the microphone on, read a public service announcement, played a 45, lather, rinse, repeat, until they were all gone. And then I went back to Howie's office, and I sat across from him at his desk and told him I was finished. Do you know how long eternity is? It's the length of time that it takes for someone to judge the work that you've just done for them and report back to you. And from the chuckle that I just heard y'all make, you've probably felt an eternity once or twice in your life too. I'm sorry. When he came back into his office, I looked up expectantly. He did not make eye contact. He slowly walked behind his desk, slowly sat into his chair, and suddenly, his desktop needed a lot of attention. Those papers over there needed to be straightened up. When he got finished with those, there were some records over here, some 33s that were sliding all over the place. So he stacked them up, and then 2 stacks of very neat 45s. And do you remember those pink while you were out message slips? Neatest pile of those I've ever seen. I sat forward in my chair. He rolled back. He still hadn't made eye contact. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere in the world, but in that room with me. And then suddenly his lips moved. That was the worst tape I've ever heard. You're hired. Have you had an experience like that in your life or in your business? Maybe somebody that you really wanted to have on your team, somebody whose opinion really mattered to you, just kind of blew you off the first time you talked to them about it. I hope, first of all, that that's never happened to you before, but in this business, it will. And I hope that when it does, you remember to do what I did. Go back, get some more education, get some more ammunition, and try again, because sometimes you have to face your fears over and over and over again before you get your first big break. Now, the job that Howie Castle hired me for was not the job I thought I was interviewing for. I thought when he said I was hired, I was a DJ. I was a board operator. I ran what we lovingly called the Sunday Morning God Squad. From 6 o'clock in the morning until noon every Sunday morning, I ran the public affairs and religious programming on the radio station. And I had one rule. Do not ever, don't even think about it. Never, 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 never touch the microphone switch. You are not talking on the radio. Okay. It wasn't the experience that I wanted, but it was the experience I needed. Because in that time of being a board operator, I learned how to use all of the equipment in the studio and how to take really different elements and make them flow together seamlessly. And also did something else. I made friends with the guy who worked from noon until 6 because he was a real DJ and he was good at it. I made friends with him and I peppered him with questions, and I would sit in the studio for hours just watching him work so that I could learn. Does this sound like you with your upline? And if not, why not? When you heard yesterday that this is a company where we checked our egos at the door, that's for real, y'all. And one of the best ways to check your ego at the door is to not assume that you're the smartest person in the room. There's a ton of knowledge and wisdom and experience and really giving, loving hearts in this room. While you're here with these people, learn from them. Make connections and make a plan that you will reach out to the people that you resonate with, just to touch base, maybe be accountability partners, maybe even a little bit more than that. Sure, your upline is there to help you, but so is everybody else in this room. It wasn't very long, about 2 months, until there was an opening for an overnight part-time disc jockey on the weekends. Midnight to 6 on Saturday, midnight to 5 on Sunday. And I got it. And I'll never forget. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I will never forget the first day that I was allowed, night, that I was allowed to turn the microphone on in the control room. You know that fear that I had when the FCC study materials came? The fear that I had in that production studio? Oh, nothing compared to this. This was sheer terror. My hand shook as I reached for the microphone switch. My mouth went completely dry. And my mind, poof, went completely blank. If it hadn't been for a 243-pound man standing right behind me, I'd probably still be running, y'all. I was terrified. Steve was there to help me through the first hour of my first air shift, to make sure that if anything went tragically wrong, he had it under control, that if I actually did run screaming and not come back, he could be there until somebody else could show up. And by the end of that first hour, the terror had turned into just plain old fear. And he knew I had it, so he left. And by the end of the first night, I was doing what he had told me how to do, preparing each break, one break at a time. Don't think about the whole show. Think about the next thing you're going to say. That's all you need to think about. Practice. Try it. Do it. Next. And it's just the same in this business. If this is new to you or something that you haven't had a whole lot of success with in the past, think about this. If you want to take that baggage, that fear that you have, and turn it into belief in yourself, all you have to do is prove to yourself that you can do it. Practice. Prepare. Lather, rinse, repeat. And let your upline be that 243-pound person standing behind you that instead of watching you run, helps you and gives you that extra little push that you might need. Because that's what they're there for, y'all. They're there to help. In this industry, but especially in Elevosity, when you succeed, Everybody succeeds. So everybody wants your success. This isn't a competition. This is a cooperation. Do you know somebody who's really, really, really good at their job? I was pretty good at radio. No, I was really, really, really good at radio. Thank you. I have retired from radio now, except for the little bit of work that I do for a couple of stations. But I loved that. It was entertaining. I got to inform people. I got to entertain people. I got to listen to my favorite songs on the radio all the time on really great speakers that I could never have afforded. And by the time I was 21 years old, I was making more money than my dad ever made. And he was so proud of me. He would tell everybody who would listen that growing up, my nickname was Motormouth. The phrase I heard the most was, "Sandy, don't monopolize the conversation." And now his baby daughter had the best scam going. She was getting paid to talk. You have the best scam going. Ever heard of Howard Stern? Who's heard of Howard Stern? Yeah? Before he was an America's Got Talent big-time judge, he was just a radio DJ, just like I was. And we ended up working in Washington, D.C. at about the same time. I was doing mornings on one station, he was doing mornings on another station. We went head-to-head in the ratings, and for the first week, Howard Stern was in my head. Because I didn't want all my listeners to go listen to see what he was doing and stay over there. I wanted them to stay with me. And I was scared, y'all. Howard Stern, he was already legendary at that point. But after about a week, I got him out of my head and got back to doing what I knew how to do best. And when the first ratings period was over with and the ratings came out, I kicked his asterisk. However, he got the last laugh. He got the cushy job in New York City. He got the nationally syndicated radio show. He got the Sirius XM satellite channel that's all him all the time. And in 2015, Forbes magazine said he was the highest paid entertainer in the world. He made $95 million that year. I made just a little bit less than that. But it's okay, I still did okay. And I was still doing what I love to do. And you will do okay too. Whether you end up being on this stage as an ambassador, or whether you stand up and say you're bronze, if you're doing this for what you want to get out of it and what you want to give, you'll succeed. You can't help but succeed. Turning your baggage into belief isn't easy. It means you've got to figure out what you're afraid of and let the people in this room and let the people in your life help you get through that fear, because you can. You can. Do you know you can? Do you know you can? I know you can. Everybody knows you can. You just have to know you can. You are enough. And you are going to kick somebody's asterisk too. If you want to. If you want to. I know most of us in this room are more than 18 years old, but I challenge you to harness the power and the fun and the joy and the invincibility of being 18 years old. And you take that feeling and you plug that into your life and into your business, and I can't wait to see where you go with that.